is, and we know what CALP is. Now we need to look at the relationship they have with the actual context in teaching. And that's where the context embedded and context reduced comes in. Okay? Context embedded refers to using aids for students, like visual aids. You might give prompts, or you might give pictures, you might give diagrams. Graphic organizers. Graphic organizers are something that I'll mention a little bit later in a little more detail. But they're aids that helps embed that material and assist in the language learning. So we see quadrant 1 is BICS with context embedded. So that would be the easiest quadrant. Let me look at the next. Yeah. Let's see if I can go to the next one. So quadrants 1 and 2 would be the easiest because it's quadrant 1 is BICS, and it's the easiest because we're helping students with aids, okay? And quadrant 2 would be a little harder because we're just presenting the material and there's no visual aids, no help from the teacher. Quadrants 3 and 4 deal with CALP, and that's what we as ESP teachers would be dealing with. And quadrant 3 is really the area that we as ESP teachers want to focus on. We want to be able to get students into that learning area because that's where they're going to have the easiest chance of learning the material. And remember that ESP students they face two challenging areas. They're learning English and they're also learning the content. Now, we talked a little bit about that primary knower. They know the content, hopefully. They know the content, but they don't know it in English. So they're learning the English language and they're learning the English language content. That's why, as I said earlier, that a lot of my colleagues, when they were teaching ESP, they tended to focus merely on vocabulary. Well, vocabulary is a big part of it, but there's other areas of the language. There's structures, there's the genre, the syntax that goes into each specific English area. Okay, business English has a different approach than, let's say, English for a technician, a mechanical engineer technician, okay, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important that we help students by giving them as much context-embedded assistance as possible. So the relationship between, if I could go back here, the relationship between the language learning concept, the CALP, and context embedded versus context reduced. Context reduced would be, I'm giving you a textbook and I'm telling you, go learn page 12. Okay, and page 12 just has a list of words. It doesn't give you any kind of assistance in the form of diagrams or me giving you examples, et cetera, et cetera. So what teachers, and this goes for general English teachers as well as ESP teachers, what our goal is really is we want to move material from demanding, challenging material from being context reduced, okay, to being context embedded. We need to help students so they can get that demanding material and learn it, okay? And let's go to our second activity, okay? And we're going to look back at our notes using the notes from Studying My Case 1, Studying My Case 2, okay? You identified what language you found and you needed that you did not have, hopefully, okay? And tell us now specific, detailed information about the language and the situations. Just saying I didn't know everything in English is not going to help us for this exercise. So be as specific as possible. Perhaps I was in line, somebody asked me the time, and I didn't know how to tell them what time it was. Okay, so be specific as possible. Now create a T-chart. Remember I mentioned before graphic organizers. Graphic organizers are aids in scaffolding for students, and that's one of those areas that helps you context embed. So we're actually going to use a graphic organizer here in this activity, okay? And I want you to make a T-chart, and a T-chart is simply you're going to draw a line. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's simply draw a line and put a line parallel. You're making a 90-degree angle. Ooh, I hate to get into math there, 90-degree angle. And then you have two categories on your T-chart, okay? So you're going to identify in your T-chart a situation, and then you're going to identify on one side the situation and on the other side the language function. What language did you need in that particular situation? Then what I want you to do after you've got your T-charts, I need you to share with the class all of your T-charts, and then I want you to whittle down. I don't know if you're familiar with that word whittle. Whittle is actually cut down, and it's, I remember when I was a kid, whittling was you took a little piece of wood and you would cut and make maybe a horse or something out of it. So to whittle down means to cut away. So I want you to take the whole class T-charts, and I want you to whittle down to the most important situations and needs. Maybe a lot of the needs and situations were common, hopefully they were, in the classroom. So we're going to whittle down those, and that's what we're going to use for the final project. Okay, we're now in the last section of our presentation here on English for specific purposes, and I want to give you something that I've found to be very important in my teaching, not only of English for specific purposes classes, but also in my general English classes as well, and I do have a few general English classes too. And that's facilitative language teaching. It's a theory about teaching English, teaching language, but primarily English, that has helped me a lot in my approach, and it helps me specify how to get students in touch with get that embedded, like we talked about last time, embed that CALP for them. So I facilitate, that's why it's called facilitative language teaching. So FLT, it's a tool that you, the teacher, can use to help students get that context embedded, okay? And we're looking here at the focus. The focus is on the form, and the teacher needs first to establish the grammar objectives, and then we're going to provide authentic examples of the structure in use. Notice we're dealing with structural language performance. So you have to identify what do your students, for example, my students in physical education, I identified that they needed to be doing things like describing how to do an exercise or giving instructions for how to do an exercise. So you need to identify a set of grammar objectives, then provide authentic examples, then give an explanation of the use and the form of the structure. Then you need to design activities, again, that will get you have the CALP. That would be the first three that we talked about there. And then you need to design activities which will make it context embedded. Remember, we're always thinking that there are two items here we're making a relationship with. We want the language learning, and then we also have to make it context embedded. We need to help that learner so they can deal with the content material, okay? And we also want to follow a sequence that moves from a little more controlled to freer activities. Now, I'm going to give you a final project. I don't know if you'll actually carry out this final project, but I'm going to ask you to create a production activity, and if you would like, it could be a very controlled or a very free. Next, you should be looking to design activities which will let the students actually practice the structure. This